Welcome back to another recording of the Joyful Mate podcast. I'm your host, Anthony Hartcher, a joyful journey mentor, and I'm here to take you on a ride to fulfillment and to experience more joy and happiness. And I'm doing that through my book writing adventure. Yes, I'm writing a book called Feeling Broken, A Path to Self-Love and Healing. And we are up to chapter 5 today. So I'm sharing chapter 5. If you haven't heard the other chapters, please listen to the prior episodes and you'll get up to speed. But it won't matter. You don't need to listen to the prior chapters. They are pretty much independent chapters, and there's all life lessons to learn and life principles to learn to really help you feel more fulfilled, integrated, and whole is the aim of every chapter and the ultimate aim of the book. So chapter 5 is Life as a Wave, Not a Line. Yes, we have this unrealistic expectation of life that it is a linear expression, or linear in terms of it should always be getting better. And it's an unrealistic expectation because at the most fundamental level, life is a wave and a particle. So we can, like waves, energy, particles, matter, but they make up the universe, waves and particles. And they're always in a state of flux or transformation. And I shared that in the previous chapter. And the previous chapter was on that there is nothing missing. It is just that we perceive things are missing, but everything is whole in that moment at the highest level. At the highest level, everything is conserved and nothing is missing. Although at the level of the senses, we perceive things to be missing or incomplete. So we're not talking about that in this chapter. We're talking about this wave and non-linear fashion of life. So we get carried away with this obsession around, and a lot of this is driven from society in terms of growth. So at a economic level, at the grand scale of a country level, the national level, it's all about GDP, gross domestic product. So the accumulation of output of every person contributing in that nation. And they like to see that constantly growing. But if you've experienced life, you'll realize that it's not constantly growing, and it's in a state of flux, and it goes up and down, and it goes negative as well. So that is translatable in every aspect of life. So like even in the workforce, so companies have really profitable months and they have not so profitable months, and sometimes they can have negative months where the cash flow is negative or they're not making money that month, or it could be that moment, it could be, and again, it is constantly transforming and constantly changing, and it is non-linear. It is this pulsing of like, we have highly productive months or periods of life, and we have very unproductive, perceived unproductive, but it contributes to the productivity. So I'll get into that shortly, but let's further explore these pulses of life that we experience. So in business, I experience busy weeks, or busy, again, it's subjective and it's also perceptions, because this week I'm busy doing the podcast and I'm not busy serving clients, or I'm not busy doing talks for corporates. I'm doing the podcast. So I'm busy, but busy in a different form. So the waves of clients, they come in waves. Some weeks busy, some weeks lots, some weeks not so many. And same with corporate clients, and same with my podcasting. I have roles and I have not so much I don't really do much podcasting. So today I think this is my third recording today. And so I'm on a roll today. I've got this wave, this podcasting wave, or this book writing wave. However, it doesn't eventuate unless I have the troughs where I'm either researching, and again, it's perception, because it's all contributing, but it's contributing in different ways, different forms. And that's what I spoke about in the previous chapter, was that there's nothing missing. It's just in a different form. So my busyness is in a different form. my reflection is in a different form. I'm not really reflecting a lot on the material I'm sharing today. I did a lot of that yesterday, but I still need to in order to continue the movement forward. So it's always entangled. It's just whether I'm perceiving one more than the other, but it's always there. And so this is life. Life comes in pulses and waves. Your energy, your so-called motivation, your drive will come in pulses and waves. And you'll realize this in exercise as well. So some days you feel great, invincible, and you have fantastic sessions. You work out really well and you're smashing personal bests and PBs and all that stuff. And then there's workouts where you just don't have the energy and not much happens, or you might not even go. But ultimately, it's contributing to those big sessions. It's the gap. It's the perceived gap. It's like in the ocean, we have sets of waves, and all the waves are of different magnitude. They're not, and they're never exactly the same. They may be a bit similar, but not exactly the same. And so the waves come at different frequencies, at different magnitudes, and sometimes there's a big gap between waves. Sometimes there's very short gap between waves. It is variable. And that's the way in which nature is. The winds, some days it's windy, some days it's not. Some days it's sunny, some days it's cloudy, some days it's really dark and gloomy. And that is nature. Some days it's hot, some days it's cold. And so, some days are longer, some days are short, but it's always in a constant state of flux. All of this is in a constant state of flux and transformation. Nothing is standing still, but it's unrealistic to expect things to be going in a linear fashion or one way, and that we have this thing that my life should always be improving or getting better. It is, you're just not perceiving it that way. And it requires troughs in order to grow. So for example, take learning. In order to learn, sometimes we need to unlearn. So it can feel like we're going back or relearning in order to learn again. And so this, although it's all part of the process, but we get fixated thinking that, it's unproductive. And I used to think when I was doing corporate work that when I was in meetings, that was unproductive time because I wasn't doing certain things. So I had this certain view that if I'm transactional and moving stuff, then I'm being productive. But if I'm being relational, like in meetings, relating and understanding, then that's unproductive. And again, I just had this distorted view of what being productive was. You're always being productive, whether you're being relational or you're being transactional. You're still being productive, and it's entangled. They both are required in order to ultimately grow. And so the growth is always there. It's the perception of growth, and we can perceive it as non-growing or growing, or it's part of the growth. And so I just want to share with you not to have this unrealistic expectation that things should always be one way. And if they're not that way, then it's unfair or life's tough or life's bad or whatever. It is what it is, and it's all part of the bigger picture. And so there's nothing ever missing in reality or in actuality. Again, we've got different versions of reality depending on the person observing it, right? So we want to, again, it's best to go with the flow as opposed to resisting it. So some days, if you don't feel like working out, it can be better sometimes not to work out or just do a lighter workout and just accept that as good enough and not be hard on yourself. I have clients come to me and they start losing weight. In the first week, they'll drop, good amount of weight, right? They're very happy. They've, whatever it be, 5, 7 kilos, 10 kilos. And then they expect that to happen week after week. And so then they feel bad that they're not achieving that and that they're not doing the work and they're not judging them and all that sort of stuff. But they don't realize it's just all part of the process, is that weight loss will come in waves. Weight gain will come in waves, right? And it's just constant state of flux and transformation. But again, it can sometimes be we need to try new things, which may tip the scales in the positive way, but okay, what are you gaining? You may be gaining muscle mass and losing fat mass. So you still may be losing fat overall, but your overall weight hasn't changed or it's gained. And so, again, there's transformation happening there. It's just whether it's in the direction you want it. But it ultimately is, because even if you're gaining body fat and you want to lose body fat, what you're learning is a way that doesn't work for you, that may have said, the textbook may have said that way works, and or the science may say that way works, and you try it and it just doesn't work for you. Everyone's different. And so we need to accept that we're going to experience things differently, and that we need to try things. Like, so even in business, in order to cut costs, we generally gain costs initially. And then over time, over the course of time, we save money. But in the initial instance, we may gain costs. Like, so when I was looking at ways in which I could reduce costs in my business, I had to experiment and trial with different technologies, and that was costing me money. And so I gained all these costs, but over time, I've worked out which ones work best and where I get the best productivity. And so over time, I'm saving money. But in the initial instance, I was gaining money, or gaining it in terms of having to invest money into my experimentation. And so this is the same with training. Like, even understanding your body and the way your body moves at certain times of the day, you may find out that you can't do high intensity training in the morning. I don't like doing high intensity training in the morning, but I love it in the afternoon. So when I'm doing it in the morning, it's not going to feel as good, but in the afternoon, it feels great. And so, again, that's experimentation. I could then assume that high intensity exercise is not for me because it doesn't work in the morning, but that's not true. It's just another part of the day where I'm better suited to high intensity training. Morning, I like doing slow, and I like to wake up slowly and do everything slow. During the day, I'm happy to go and fast forward. I'm happy to be, really, again, productive, but I need that downtime in order to have the uptime. So again, it's all part of life, and it's all perceptions as to whether we see it as a step back or a step forward. Ultimately, it can be perceived either way, depending on how you view things, but it really is part of the process, and we need to accept that it's part of life, that things happen in waves. There's economic cycles. There's cycles where you feel energetic and not so energetic. You feel like exercise, not exercise. You feel like eating clean, not eating clean. You feel like working hard and not working hard. It's all part of life. And we need to be realistic, that as opposed to unrealistic and thinking that life is all one-sided, that we're all productive and we need to be productive all the time. We need time to be reflective in order to drive productivity. When we're reflective, we find better ways of doing things. So again, it's all part of the process, but we need to see it that way. We don't want to get fixated on what success or what productivity looks like. If we get fixated in the form, then we're losing the bigger picture of where productivity is coming from, or where the next success is going to come from. And it comes from maybe that step backwards, that you realize that didn't work in order to be propelled forward. It may be the unlearning in order to have an expansion or explosion in learning. But, we need to trim the bush back in order for it to explode and grow again. And that's life. We need to trim back our baggage and attachments in order to go freer and forward and expansive. So it's all part of the process, and we need to accept that life is ebbs and flows, and that we're best to ride it and accept it as it is and work with it as opposed to resist it. Because when we resist it, we feel like we're not making progress. We feel like we're not, and we get stuck. Whereas it's just the mindset. It's just the way we perceive things. And we need to see the bigger picture in order to feel whole, to feel integrated. And yes, this is life. Life is in ebbs and flows. days where you're having great relationships and interactions, and days where you're a bit off and you're not having great interactions and relationships. But that's life, and it goes the ebbs and flows. And how can you have one without the other? Ultimately, because we're doing that comparison, because we had the down day, then we feel great on the high day. But if we always had high days, how will we know we had high days? So this is a bit of the paradox around it as well, is that we comparing it to a previous day or a previous interaction or a previous workout. And again, we see it with elite sports stars. They're not always performing at their peak. They have down days, they have down events, they have not so good. But it's not that that's not taking them forward. It's they're learning different lessons and the output's not there. They need to relearn things or do things a bit differently in order to move forward. And that's how we want to see those days where we're not as productive, is that it's going to ultimately help you be productive the next day because you're gaining energy in order to expend it the next day. It's like sickness. Like sickness, we can think, it sucks, but ultimately it forces us to rest and then we bounce back even stronger. So I've just overcome some sickness and I'm feeling really energetic this week, but last week I felt crap. I had no energy. I couldn't have done these podcasts. I would have been down and out and you wouldn't have wanted to listen to me and I wouldn't have been making sense. So I didn't do it last week. I accepted that this is a week where I'm just going to rest and go with the flu and ride the flu out. And I rode it out and I'm feeling energetic and I'm bouncing back. And you're seeing the output of it. But obviously last week there wasn't much output other than I had a lot of time to reflect on the book and reflect on what I'm going to write about and what I'm going to share. So just remember, life is not a race or a ladder, which is a linear sort of progression that you're always beating or always running or always overtaking. There's going to be times where you get overtaken and you overtake, they overtake, you overtake. And again, it's ebbs and flows. It's the same as the ladder. We climb the ladder, but we want to make sure we're climbing the ladder against the right wall as opposed to racing up the ladder and realizing it's against the wrong wall. We would have been better taking it really slowly up the right wall than racing up the ladder on the wrong wall. Again, we need that moment to reflect and be unproductive and slow. And it's like that slow and steady wins the race. We need these moments where we're unproductive, we're not fruitful, we've got nothing to show for our day. And that is something. There's something that we've gained in that day. We're just not seeing it. And so you want to look, what have I gained this day? Well, today I've realized that I've responded to how my body's feeling. I'm respecting my body. This is where it's at. It's not energetic. And so I'm accepting it. I'm working with my body so that it can get heal. That's probably what it needs to do, or rejuvenate. And then we bounce back together. And so instead of fighting your body and saying, why aren't you moving with me? My head's racing ahead and the body's not keeping up. Go with it. It's such a better state to be in, is where you feel in this complete flow and ebbs and just moving. It's like lying in the ocean and just allowing the waves to pass under you and your body just surrendering and moving with the wave, and as opposed to resisting it and then not feeling much. We experience so much more when we go with the ebbs and flows because we appreciate the highs. And then we start to appreciate the lows because we see how the lows contribute to the highs. And we have an overall appreciation for life as opposed to just appreciating one side of life and hoping more of that happens. And if it doesn't happen, then I'm upset and disappointed. Whereas that low is always contributing in some way, in some form, to the bigger picture. And so it's all part of the journey. Embrace the journey of life. Go along with the ebbs and flows and ride the wave of life. If you've enjoyed this chapter, please share it with others. I'd love you to share this episode, get it out to more people so that they can ride the wave of life. And if you're loving this content, buy the book pre-sale. It's at 50% discount. Go to joyfulmate.com and join the movement. Join the Joyful Mate movement. Become part of the community. Buy the book and get all this bonus content and community along with the book. enlist in the pre-sales, joyfulmate.com. You'll be able to buy the book for 50% discount and go along for a journey that's more fulfilling, and you experience more joy and happiness in your life. And it is all part of a journey that starts with now. So embrace it, ride the wave of life, and until next time, continue to experience life to the fullest.